ovulation is the releasing of an egg to be fertilized. Whether you want to get pregnant or not, ovulation is essential, because if you're not ovulating, it's a good sign that your body is telling you that it's too stressed, it's not getting enough nutrients. And you might want to take a look inward. And stress can mean many things. Like, especially in my realm, a lot of it means chronic dieting, overtraining. Those are the biggest ones.
Mm-hmm.
Nutrient depleted diet, because everyone just tracks their macros and they don't give a shit what type of food they're eating. So those are all like really, really common things we want to look at. But if you're not ovulating, maybe you want to start seeing if you're ovulating or confirming, because that's the best sign of health out there.
Today's episode is with Dr. Hailie Schoff. Dr. Hailie is a licensed and practicing chiropractor, integrative health practitioner, and podcaster with a master's degree in applied clinical nutrition. She is also a former collegiate athlete who has a passion for teaching people how to bridge the gap between fitness and holistic health. With a focus on women's hormones and gut health, Dr. Hailie has helped hundreds of people all over the world regain their health through lifestyle, optimal diet, movement, and functional practices. So in today's episode, we're going to be chatting all about the most common root causes of hormonal imbalances, and Dr. Hailie is going to break down the roles of different hormones in a way that anyone can understand. We also are going to discuss the risks and benefits of hormonal birth control and some of the things that your doctor may not be telling you. I really, really enjoyed this episode with Dr. Hailie, and I know you're going to take a lot away from it and get a lot out of it. So let's get into this episode with Dr. Hailie Schoff. All right, welcome back to MetFlex and Chill. This is your host, Rachel Gregory, and I'm here with Dr. Halie Schoff. How are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. We were on your podcast last week recording. That was a great conversation. So I'm excited to kind of flip the switch and have you here for me to interview you and ask you all the questions.
Yeah, I'm excited. That was a great podcast, by the way. That released, well, as we're talking today on Thursday, it released yesterday. Lots of great feedback. People loved it. So thank you again. And I'm so happy to be here chatting about hormones and all things birth control and kind of what we need to know, because that's a question that I know that we both get all the time. So I'm really excited to chat about it.
Yeah, I'm excited to do a full episode on this. I've touched on it a little bit like in past episodes, just briefly. So I'm excited to kind of just dive into like all things female hormones, birth control, all of that, because like you said, I get tons of questions on this. So I'm excited for this one. Before we jump in, do you want to just give our audience, whether they're viewing this or listening to it, just a little bit on your background, how you got into the nutrition and fitness space?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've always been interested in fitness and health. I was an athlete growing up. I played soccer, softball, ski. And then I went to college to play softball. And like, it just was really important for me to like, if I wanted to be the best athlete, I know that I had to take care of myself. I ended up tearing my ACL. And so that kind of brought me down the whole rabbit hole of like, how can I come back and be the best? And I think a huge part of that was the rehab, strength, and nutrition that I had pre and post surgery. Fast forward, I ended up being told that I was never going to play again. I was never going to, go anywhere with that. And then I ended up being all conference honorable mention that following year after I think I pitched like 2 innings my freshman year just because I was still rehabbing, recovering. And so more of the story is sports and just fitness in general has just been a huge part of my life. I was that person. Like I loved to work out before I pitched because I just feel like it got all the blood flowing and I felt super strong and I was in the good condition for it. And so that's just like been ingrained in who I am. And so, I've kind of dabbled within thinking about, okay, do I want to compete? Did I want to do bodybuilding? Did I want to do any of that? I never ended up going that route. I just kind of more fell into like just being competitive in fitness with myself, apart from once I graduated from high school or from college and kind of stopped playing. And then I had my own kind of health journey that I was like, okay, I'm healthy, like I'm fit, I've got all this muscle, like I'm super strong, but like, why is my skin breaking out? Why are my hormones not great? And so then that kind of made me go into this whole realm of like more holistic health. And so after college, I decided I wanted to go to chiropractic school, where I had an amazing treatment with a chiropractor while I was in college. I had really hurt my SI joint, my low back. And I just loved her take to like getting people out of pain with zero medication and just like all holistic, an alternative, quote, alternative therapies. And so that's kind of where I transitioned that. And then that led me right to chiropractic school. Within chiropractic school, I was learning a lot about the human body, human physiology, like how everything works. And I was learning a lot about how nutrition affects us and how ingredients affects us, and how I was on hormonal birth control at the time, and like how that was depleting me of like so many different vitamins. I had started to get test anxiety. My bowels were all irregular. Like I had a lot of gut issues, and I kind of started to think like, oh, wow, could this potentially be from one, a insanely stressful lifestyle, and two, potential, vitamin deficiencies due to birth control that's not actually fixing why I went on birth control in the first place, which was acne. I never had horrible acne, but I'd get like the cystic acne, and nobody wants any type of acne, whether it's horrible or even mild to moderate. And so it really kind of got me down this rabbit hole. So then, and kind of towards the mid part of chiropractic school, I enrolled in my master's of applied clinical nutrition, because I knew that like I wanted to really work with a whole person. Like I wanted to obviously adjust people, do muscle work, stretching, rehab, all that stuff. But I also wanted to be able to like have the basis to counsel people on adequate nutrition and like really personalized bio-individual nutrition. And so I got down that rabbit hole. I got out of chiropractic school, started practicing. I really kind of made an integrative clinic for myself. I started seeing both virtual and in-person nutrition patients, more holistic kind of nutrition, started building my chiropractic patients. And then I really started to build online, especially with COVID. And so then I really just kind of transitioned into this space of like, okay, my jam is like teaching people about hormones, teaching people about gut health, teaching people about root cause things that I wish that I knew when I was going through my journey. And I kind of, because I come from such like a fitness background, and like I so resonate with that, is like who I am. But I also am like a very hippy dippy person who's like, I've got an oil for everything, and I've got an herb for everything. And like, I feel like it's so funny because typically you're usually on one side or the other. Like those people are like, oh, overtraining and training is bad, and you don't need all these things. And like, you could just do yoga and you're good. Whereas like, no, I want to lift heavy shit, and I want to like be super strong, but I also like want to use my oils and like be a hippie. So I kind of like merge the two. And that's who I am. Right. So that's what I do. That's a huge thing that I talk about and that I integrate into my practice. I just recently this year, became an integrative health practitioner, just because I really wanted a little bit more sound basis on just more in-depth functional protocols and running more functional labs, because as you might know, and as your listeners I'm sure know, like we don't get a ton of answers from conventional labs. So I just wanted more tools for the toolbox. And that's what I do. That's what I love. And that's what I'm passionate about.
I love it. I feel like I can relate to your story a lot, just your background, like sports, and even when you're mentioning about like going on birth control for acne, like I did that, when I was in high school as well. That's the only reason I went on birth control, is because I was, self-conscious about my acne. And I had obviously I was in high school. I had no idea like what the repercussions could be, because of that. I went on Accutane as well, right? That's what it's called. Yeah. And there was obviously like with that one, I was just like, that one I was like early on in high school, and it was like you had to get a pregnancy test every month, because if you got pregnant, like there was a huge chance that your kid could have, issues. And that in itself, I was like, oh, okay, whatever. This is like the normal protocol. But like now I think about it, I'm like, what?
I know. Like, it makes no sense when you say these things out loud. You're like, what even?
Yeah. And like my parents, like my mom, she works in healthcare. She's a medical malpractice lawyer, but like, even with that, like she didn't have the education or the background or any idea to kind of say, okay, like this is probably not a good idea. She kind of just listened to what the doctor said, right? Because we trust, what your doctor says, because the doctor knows everything. At least that's what a lot of people think. So, there's always more to the story. And usually, if it's one of those things, it's like, it's too good to be true. It probably is, especially when it comes to things like that. So
totally. I remember the dermatologist told me, she's like, oh, just go to your OB and go on birth control. She said, I bet I'll never see you again. And I was like, wow, like that's amazing. Could you just really fix my acne from one pill? But like, that's the society that we're in. Well, obviously now I know better. And like, I've done the hard work to uncover the root causes. But at that time, it's like, I don't know how old was I, 20? A 20-year-old, you'll be like, oh, your skin's going to look freaking beautiful. It's like, okay, sign me up. Like, I don't care. It's so crazy, but I do feel like there's a big shift, especially within the birth control movement, where we're not told essentially how birth control works. We're not told why we're being put on it. We're not being told risks and benefits. And so there's definitely a big shift, I feel like, in terms of people like really wanting to understand what is going on in their own body. And I think that's amazing. And I'm here for that.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have that as one of the topics that we want to talk about. So why don't we just start off with that one? Like what are the risks and benefits, behind using birth control? Like, is there anything that any key factors that you want to make sure that people know, whether it's for them or for their kids, anything like that?
Sure. So I'm definitely not anti birth control, right? Like, I think it's great that females have the option that if they don't want to get pregnant, they have this option, and that's great. But with all great things and with everything, like even chiropractic treatments, even like really low invasive like muscle work, there's a risk and a benefit to everything, to literally everything we do, to the water that you drink, to the foods that you eat, to the medications you're on. There's a risk and benefit to literally everything. And it's your right to know what those things are. So me personally, I don't know about you, but I definitely was not told. Like, I was not told by my OB, hey, this is the risk, this is the benefits, this is how this works. I was never told that. So essentially how birth control or oral contraceptive works, IUDs are a little bit different, which we can get into, but oral contraceptives essentially work by shutting the communication off between your brain, your hypothalamus, and your ovaries. So there's no communication to them to be like, hey, produce estrogen, hey, produce this, produce this. Like, you're not cycling anymore, because that total brain ovary communication is just shut off, because you're having endogenous or exogenous hormones through the pill, like progestin, and just synthetic estrogen. So that's not your own hormone. So the pill, the way it works, cannot balance your hormones. It's literally shutting yours down so that the synthetic hormones can just kind of do their thing and like have a fake bleed and a fake period and all that fun stuff. So that's essentially how it works. Most people, I didn't know that. And so when I found that out, I was like, this is infuriating.
Huh.
So potential risks, obviously, really low, really like lower key, most common risks are, it's definitely making you more prone to B vitamin deficiencies, because of just the mechanism how it works is you're going to deplete B vitamins with recycling and detoxing the pill. You're going to deplete more magnesium, which, go figure, that's why I had test anxiety, because it's depleting all of these things that you need for a calm and healthy nervous system. It also is making you a lot more prone to things like leaky gut. Long-term use of birth control has been associated with potential increase in breast cancer, just because of the synthetic estrogens. And obviously more or less common risks, but still very heavily important for someone to tell someone, is risk of blood clots and risk of stroke. I know actually a few people personally who have had blood clots, and or one who was actually a distant cousin of mine who had a stroke when her practitioner switched her birth control. And that was never a risk that she was aware of. And I have a huge problem with that, because like, if I'm going to give something to somebody, I want them to know like fully everything that can happen, so that informed consent can be there to be like, I understand my risks, but this is worth it to me. And that's okay. Whereas I don't know if I was sitting in that chair being like, you might have issue, you might not get your period back right when you go off birth control. It can have issues with fertility, which is now what I see in practice. It's going to deplete this and this. So make sure that, make sure you take a B vitamin, make sure you take all these things. I was never told that. I might have probably sat there and been like, why do I have acne in the first place? Like, that should be what I'm trying to figure out. Right. Again, I'm not anti-birth control. I just really want people to understand what it's doing, because I think a lot of women go on it and then think that, okay, now that they're in their mid 20s, early 30s, they want to get pregnant. And it's not that easy, because they've been on it for 10, 15 years. That's something that I want people to be aware of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love that. And it kind of, it hits home a little bit for me in terms of not myself, but my sister. Actually, she just asked me this question last week, because she has been on birth control for 10 plus years. And last month or 2 months ago, she finally stopped, because she's looking to, get pregnant sometime soon. And, she, like I said, she's been on it for 10 plus years. And we were talking last week, and she's already having like a lot of issues in terms of symptoms and like headaches and things like that kind of coming off of it. So in terms of someone who has, there's so many questions that I can ask in this regard, but this one came to mind, like someone who's coming off birth control, like what are some of the main things that they should pay attention to, or that they should be doing in terms of, their nutrition or whatever it may be to kind of help with that transition?
Great question. Great question. And so I think this is super important. So if you haven't been on, a methylated or activated B vitamin, that's something you probably want to get on, because that's probably been a deficiency you've had since you've been on the pill. And the reason I say methylated is because I'm not really a fan of synthetic B vitamins like folic acid and just all those. You always want to see like the methyl before, like methylfolate or methylcobalamin. You want to look for that on your vitamin. Be on a high quality magnesium. Those are really important. Other things, like in terms of nutrition wise, especially because I see the birth control lead to leaky gut. It can really lead to things like SIBO and candida because of just the imbalance that it can create. Women are a lot more prone to having yeast infections just because of, again, that connection between the gut, and our vaginal canal has a lot of really great probiotic bacteria. But again, if those things are misaligned, we're more prone to those things. So really focusing in on the gut is really, really important. For hormones, a lot of people don't necessarily see them connected, whereas everything is connected, but especially our gut and our hormones. And so I really like when people can kind of go on a diet that is really, really supportive of closing that leakiness, right? So if we think of our gut, it should be like this, but leaky gut is kind of like where things can kind of get through into the bloodstream. You might have more food sensitivities, you might have more bloating. So going on a very simplistic whole food Paleolithic type diet and knowing potentially what your triggers are, right? Maybe it's a great time to try an elimination diet and see if you get out all these foods that are more prone to inflammation, how does that do with your symptoms? How are you feeling? And I think that even if you do it for 4 to 6 weeks and then you kind of slowly introduce, it's really a good way to kind of kickstart that healing journey, but really focusing really much so on nutrient dense whole foods, as we always should for hormone health and just optimal health in general. We shouldn't be eating foods out of our pantry. We should be eating most foods out of our fridge, whether it's vegetables, high quality protein, some really, really great foods that I like people to add in, organic grass-fed bone broth, because that collagen and that glycine and glutamine is really going to go in and help seal any of that leakiness that could be in the gut. Is really soothing. It's really a good building block for hormones. Like I said in our sound check, I really love liver. You can always take a desiccated liver capsule, because I know that it's intimidating to take for some people, but it's a really amazing nutrient dense food. Eggs can be really amazing. You just want to know how well you tolerate it. Cruciferous vegetables too are really, really important because they're going to help support detoxification from the synthetic estrogen. So those things are like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, all those different types of cruciferous veggies. Broccoli sprouts are great. I've got some that I do at my house. They're super easy. You just sprout the seeds and then you've got the broccoli sprouts, and they're a lot more potent than broccoli. Really great for hormone detoxification. So those are kind of some areas that you want to definitely be focusing on. I really especially highly encourage people to give themselves time before they go off the pill and before that they want to try to get pregnant, because we can be detoxing from the pill for at least 10 years. And so I tell people, especially if they're trying to have as low tox pregnancy as possible, you want to be off it for a few months and really support your detox pathways. And so that means sweating, you want to be having healthy bowel movements, which that's something that most people don't have. A healthy bowel movement is well-formed, 1 to 3 movements a day, easy to pass. It's kind of the size or lengthwise of your forearm, not size wise necessarily, but you want to be having healthy elimination pathways, because if you don't, those things just continue to recirculate in the body and then can definitely wreak havoc on your hormones.
Yeah, for sure. That's a lot of good tips
I know.
there.
I was okay, I'm going to calm it down for a second because I could just keep word vomiting.
I love it because I do the same thing. As you know, I probably word vomited all last week when we were talking.
No, it was great.
There's just so much, but that shows that you're super passionate about this. You know what you're talking about. You've been, in it for a while and, working with people. So that comes through. So I love it. I would have you keep talking, but I have so many other questions that I want to ask. But those are all great tips. I think one other question I had, and just in terms of, coming off of birth control or coming off of oral contraceptives, what would be kind of if someone was listening to this and they're currently on birth control and they actually don't want to, come off of it, or they don't know how to transition to maybe a different form, what's your kind of take on that? Like, how would you, help someone?
Like support them while they're on it?
Yeah, support them while they're on it, or, support them while they're on it if it's an oral contraceptive and then they don't want to change from that. And then potentially, like, if there's other alternatives that are more common now that you would recommend.
Yeah, definitely. So if you feel like birth control is the right option for you, I 100% support you. Make sure you're on a good methylated B vitamin. Definitely make sure you're taking magnesium, eating a whole food, nutrient dense diet. Like we had those foods, same foods that we had talked about, same foods are going to apply while you're on and as you continue your journey. Additionally, probably a good high quality probiotic would be really beneficial for just supporting that healthy microbiome, especially if you are more prone to like yeast infections or UTIs or things like that, which that is, again, something I see a lot more common in people who are on birth control. So that's just important to know if you are interested in getting off. What was that question again?
So if you're interested in like if you've
switching to a better alternative.
Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, we've got so you've got obviously a barrier method, right? That's in terms of birth control. You've got a barrier method. You've got a copper IUD, which copper IUDs are great. They still come with a risk because of the fact that essentially the way they work is the copper creates microinflammation in your pelvis that will kill sperm cells or kill the sperm. And so that's essentially how that works. So if you have painful periods, if you have heavy bleeding, that might not be the best option for you, as it can accentuate and make pain and bleeding heavier and make pain worse. So that's just important to know. I think that probably is the best non-hormonal option. There are like the Mirena IUD, which is still hormonal, but it is, I guess, better in the fact where it still is allowing your body to cycle and to ovulate, which is good, because I see our female cycle as just a vital sign. Like it's just like our blood pressure. It's just like our heart rate. It's just like our body weight in terms of like, how is our health? Right. I actually think that that's probably, especially for females, that's like the most important vital sign is like, how are you ovulating every month? I mean, that's like the most key sign of health is, are you ovulating? And so that is a plus side. If you are on an IUD, is you can still do those things and you will still have more of a normal cycle. But again, they always come with a risk. You also have fertility awareness method, which is taking your daily temperature. Certain things like the Ava band is what I use. I wear it at night. It tracks breathing rate, heart rate, basal body temperature. It measures your sleep and HRV, and it essentially graphs like all of those things and it plots those things. And so it takes all your data. You can track your cervical mucus, which around ovulation, it will get like a egg white consistency. And so knowing kind of all those parameters, it can suggest when your fertile window is. And so when you're in your fertile window, if your goal is birth control, you just either say, you don't have intercourse, or you use some other form of protection or whatever. Or if you want to get pregnant, then that's a phenomenal time to like do that. I've been using that method, fertility awareness, for a lot of years. That sounds so uneducated. For, I don't know, maybe 3-4 years now.
Yeah.
And honestly, like it just has made me so much more in tune with my body and what it's telling me. And like, I know where I'm at in my cycle, and because of that, I know how to support myself in different ways. I know when to take it easier. I know when to like fuel myself. And it's honestly the most empowering thing in the world is knowing yourself and your body. And so I really highly recommend that method. I think that it's really effective. And I think if anything, we all should be at least tracking our cycle to know how many days do we typically have. And what a cycle means is like from bleed to bleed. So typical cycles, 25 to 35 days. And it can range, like, someone might be 25 days and that's normal for them. Whereas someone might be 32 and like, that could be normal for them. And so it's really, really important to know those things. Because then when you work with somebody, or when you're just trying to kind of troubleshoot what's going on hormonal wise, they're going to want to ask you those questions. So you can really pinpoint things. So there's a lot of really great free apps out there like Flow. You can do it through the iPhone health app. You can track cervical mucus and ovulation tests and all those kind of things to make you a little bit more empowered about, what's truly going on in your body.
Yeah. I love all that. That's very, very insightful. I think that that's one of the things too. It's just a lot of people don't know, they don't understand like what's going on during your cycle, what your hormones are doing, like what even sex hormones are. Like people hear estrogen and progesterone. And this is kind of me going back to like even just high school and thinking about like what I learned in my, health class, nothing related to this.
Right.
And I wish like there was and I'm sure it depends like what type of school you go to, whatever. But I feel like a lot of people are just not educated on what's actually happening, or females are not educated on what's actually happening with their hormones as they're going through their cycles. And then obviously getting into, other stages of your life as well. Maybe that's one of the topics that we wanted to discuss, just kind of like sex hormones, female hormones, like what's happening during the times of the month. I can't talk anymore today. And the day has just started. So that's basically what's happening like as you go through your cycle during the month, what's happening with your hormones, how's that affecting you? Obviously everybody's heard of PMS and they kind of know the signs and symptoms of that, but like, what's really happening? Maybe you can kind of break that down for us so people kind of understand what's happening, like ways that they can support that during their cycle, support those different things during their cycle. Really loaded question, so feel free to go at it however you want.
No. I feel like I need to like break out a whiteboard and like draw things out. But okay, so essentially we'll start with your period, right? So your period is day 1 of your cycle. It's your bleed. So at your period, your hormones are at its lowest because you're shedding your uterine lining and like everything's got to kind of rebuild from there. So things are pretty low. That's why you might feel just a little bit more low energy, a little bit more just like, drawn in, a little bit more tired. I mean, it's a great time to add in a little bit more iron rich foods like liver, beef, lamb, like darker chicken meat, like things like that, like are really, really good, especially if you have a heavier flow. It's going to help a lot with your energy levels just because of the iron deficiency. But, probably not a time to go, I don't know, run a marathon. Probably not a great time. I have totally PR'd on, days like 3, 4, 5 of my period. And like, that's totally fine. So just because I'm saying something doesn't mean like you have to take everything I'm saying verbatim, but just in general, like it might validate certain feelings. And so I'm also a big proponent of common doesn't mean it's normal. So it is normal to just like be a little bit more like, just chill during like the first, I don't know, at least few days of your bleed, especially if it's heavier. Honor your body. You're expending a ton of energy and a ton of calories. Like they say like 300-ish calories just bleeding. So just understand that, just so that you're not like, oh my gosh, I thought I was going crazy. You're not going crazy. So, as we kind of go through like day 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, your estrogen is really starting to build again. So I really love helping or having people incorporate flax seeds into kind of at least the first half of their cycle, if not all the way through, because it's a great food. But flax seeds are really, really great for nurturing and building that estrogen, because estrogen is kind of like the star of the show within the first half of our cycle. So as the days go on, estrogen kind of continues to build, and around everybody's a little different. So I'm going to use the 30-day cycle. So a 30-day cycle, bleed to bleed around day like 14, 15, that's midway, right? So then we kind of start entering this ovulation phase, which ovulation is the releasing of an egg to be fertilized. Whether you want to get pregnant or not, ovulation is essential, because if you're not ovulating, it's a good sign that your body is telling you that it's too stressed, it's not getting enough nutrients, and you might want to take a look inward. And stress can mean many things, like especially in my realm, a lot of it means chronic dieting, overtraining. Those are the biggest ones. Nutrient depleted diet, because everyone just tracks their macros and they don't give a shit what type of food they're eating. So those are all like really, really common things we want to look at. But if you're not ovulating, maybe you want to start seeing if you're ovulating or confirming, because that's like the best sign of health out there. Around ovulation, our skin is glowy. We are super, super, super outgoing. We are just like vibrant, right? Because if you think about it evolutionarily, like that's when we're trying to find a mate, and that's when we're trying to get pregnant. So it's like we are just like glowing. We're like amazing, right? Like that's like my favorite time. My workouts are always the best. I just can push it in my business and training, and like I just feel amazing. So during that time, we should be feeling like superstars. I do like to add in a little bit more carbs around ovulation just to be able to support healthy progesterone, because we start making progesterone after the egg is released. So if you don't ovulate, you're not making progesterone. And so estrogen, like I said, it's like that hormone that we just like, it makes us feel feminine, right? Like it gives us our feminine features. It's really great for your skin, all of these types of things. But the problem can be when an estrogen is overriding progesterone. They're a balancing act, right? So I think estrogen gets a bad rap because it's kind of responsible for PMS, heavy periods, those types of things, but it's not all bad. We just want that healthy balance. And so after ovulation, if we release an egg, we should start making progesterone. And progesterone's like that very chill, calm, cool, collective hormone. It's going to increase your metabolism a little bit. So you might feel a little bit more hungry second half of the cycle. So always like make sure you're having adequate protein, healthy fats, lots of fiber with each meal, just so that you don't tend to like overdo it. Because I mean, I work with a lot of people where like they are just stuck in the pantry and they're just grabbing everything. And so that's kind of, again, that balance between estrogen and progesterone. So if you wear like a fitness tracker, like a Whoop, Apple Watch, whatever, you might start to see your heart rate go up kind of, not significantly, like a beat or two, but steady rise second half of the cycle. It's a great sign. It's showing that increase in your metabolism and you can just see it, which is cool. And so as that's going, you, a few days, like a week or two before, probably like 5 to 7 days before your period, you are going to get a dip in estrogen, which is sometimes what can make us feel those symptoms, like PMS, irritability. We're just like, we hate the world. So that's kind of going back to the common is normal. Very common for women to like have PMS, to have all these different symptoms, but it's not normal. And you do not have to experience those things on a monthly basis. Like you don't have to dread the week before your cycle because you shouldn't. Honestly, it should just be another time where you just maybe feel like you don't even have to necessarily feel the hormonal shifts. They're happening, but there's things that you can do to kind of support them. So you want to make sure you're ovulating and producing progesterone, because if you are, that's balancing things out, because estrogen's like that hot, like that makes us like, feisty and sassy. Whereas progesterone's like, no, like we're cool, we're calm, collective. So like, if you find yourself like snapping at your partner or something, like that's estrogen, probably not progesterone because you haven't made enough. So things to support progesterone, like I said, I really love like higher carb days, kind of in and around ovulation, just because it's going to support that. Really like taking a look in to see like, did I overstress myself? Was I nourished enough? I really like certain herbs like chase tree is really great for helping that communication between the brain and the ovaries to help produce progesterone. Certain foods like sweet potatoes, beets, sunflower seeds are amazing. Sesame seeds, tahini, those are all like really good, like progesterone boosting. But in general, all of our sex hormones need cholesterol and fat as a precursor. So if you're not eating enough fat, you're not going to make a lot of progesterone. I have worked with a lot of people where they've come from like the dieting space, the bodybuilding space, and like they're lucky if they eat 40 grams a day. And I'm like, you probably aren't making enough sex hormones because you just don't have enough foundation. And so I'm not saying you need to eat 150 grams of fat a day. And I'm not saying you necessarily even need to track it, but don't be afraid of, drizzling some olive oil on your salad. Don't be afraid of like having some, full fat dairy. If you eat dairy, don't be afraid of having those things, because those are truly like that building block that we need.
Yeah.
So, a week before our cycle, kind of things are kind of starting to drop, in terms of hormones are kind of on that swing down, so that you can get ready to kind of be at baseline again and have that bleed. And then we just kind of do the whole process all over again.
Wow. That was probably the most in-depth way that I've heard it explained, but the most like, what's the word? Like simple. But
oh, good. Okay. That makes me happy. Good.
I don't know if that makes any sense because they're both opposing words, but you said it, like you went through it very in depth, but like it was just very understandable in terms of those things. So,
well, thank you.
Props to you.
It's taken some practice, because I used to be so bad at taking like such complex things and turning them down. So that means a lot.
Yeah, no, I love it. And it's something that, just people have probably heard it before, just like kind of going through the cycle and things like that, but just really understanding like what's happening. Then also like you went through some ways to support the different periods. I guess we kind of already talked about this, but if you are on birth control and like you're not ovulating, are you still can you still expect these things to kind of happen? Or is it just kind of all that goes out the window?
You're not really cycling at all. I mean, so like,
yeah,
you can by all means do the things I just said. It's not really making a difference because you're taking a synthetic hormone to replace what your body would already make. And so that's not really going to make any difference, unfortunately.
Yeah. So just kind of go back to the second topic we talked about how to support yourself
Yeah.
if you are. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Awesome. Okay. So how much time do we have? 10, 20. All right. I think we have time to, this was the first thing that we were supposed to talk about. Just talking about like root causes of hormonal imbalance. And I feel like this one, like we could talk about this for hours and hours. So what would be just kind of the most common root causes that you find for hormonal imbalances? And I know, again, like this is like, there's so many different routes to go down with this and very individual, but like just in terms of common ones, maybe how you would address those if you were working with someone.
Totally. And I'd say, okay, so the biggest thing is stress. The biggest thing is stress, but stress comes in a lot of different forms. And so those I'll kind of go into what I see. So one, overtraining or like just totally lack of any movement in general. It goes both ways. I mean, it's that balance. Like you have to know what's right for you. And so like being super sedentary is a huge stress to the body, but also like training balls to the wall 6 to 7 days a week, even 5 days might be too heavy for someone. And so like, you have to really know like what that is for you. That's a really common one because any stress, progesterones are really sensitive hormones. So any stress to the body is going to steal away from progesterone because it's going to cortisol. Like all those nutrients are going because it's like, we have to make cortisol. We have to make cortisol. Progesterone, sorry, like you're left with nothing. But I've read a lot of Dutch test. Dutch test stands for dried urine test for comprehensive hormones, just for your listeners. And so essentially I like that a lot better than blood draw because blood draw is like, oh, boom, snapshot in time. Like what's everything look like? It's like if I took a picture of like the highway, right? Like there's a bunch of cars there, but like those cars are not going to be there like even 2 seconds later. So it's just like a very quick snapshot. Whereas when it's through urine, it's taking a weighted average. It's just much more accurate. And so I've read a lot of tests where I'm like, how much are you training? Like how much of you are dieting because their sex hormones are just boop, like zero. Like they're in the menopausal range. They're not cycling. I see this a lot in bodybuilders in that community. Nothing against bodybuilding. I mean, it's an intense sport. But it can wreak havoc on your hormones, especially if not done properly. So where was I going with this? Oh, okay. So, big root causes stressors, right? Yeah. So overtraining, you have to know that balance. Like, what does that right balance and movement look like for you? It's really, really important to figure that out. Dieting or overeating, right? Because they're both stressors. Like there's no like perfect way, but like you fit somewhere in the middle, right? Have you been under eating? Have you been eating like 1,300 calories for years on end? Like that's a big stressor. Like your body's in like starvation mode and it's in like, okay, we are definitely not going to have a period because like we don't know if we're getting enough food to be able to, fuel anything, let alone have healthy hormones. Your hormones are like, I look at sex hormones, especially sex hormones, as like a luxury. Like our body is meant to essentially survive and reproduce. And like if we are surviving, if we are just stuck in survival, our body does not care about reproducing. Whether you want to get pregnant or not, you have to think of our sex hormones in that way, because that's just truly the way they're designed. Like our body every single month is like, okay, we're preparing for a pregnancy. Okay, we're not pregnant. All right, let's have a bleed and we do it all over again. Like that's just how your body works. So you have to kind of think of it that way. Like if you aren't in this mode where you're supporting safety and like adequate nutrition, like stress is, I see the biggest takeaway from that. Another big stressor, which I do a lot and I see a lot, is environmental stress. So the endocrine disrupting toxins that you're exposed to, the fragrances, the perfumes, the parabens, those like candles that we all have, those plugins. I mean, if you really want to go down a rabbit hole, there's so much just in our own household with like flame retardants, like dust, like all of these things that like, okay, you love the smell of your favorite candle. Like it makes you happy. Great. Your hormones really might not like it. So there's a lot of different kind of things there. And that was, I'd say, a huge rabbit hole that I went down when going off birth control. Is like, I detoxed my entire lifestyle and it's been a journey. And like, I've been on that journey for probably like 6 years now. And so I'm not saying you please, like, don't go throw out everything that I just mentioned, but like make a conscious effort to be like, are these things serving me? Or like, are they potentially impacting me? Which they are. I mean, fragrance, any type of endocrine disruptor, essentially what it's doing, like the parabens, phthalates, fragrance, is it mimics estrogen. And so it's messing with your estrogen receptors and like throwing off essentially your whole like hormonal rhythm because of these synthetic things, kind of similar to birth control, but not really. So that's a really, really common one too. So I'd see like stress is like this overarching umbrella, and like you kind of play as a listener, like, okay, what is that stressor that's affecting me? Is it like, I've been seriously mentally stressed because I've been going through a lot, or I've been physically stressed because I know I push my body too hard, or I don't fuel it properly, or like I eat mostly crap and I could be eating a lot more better foods. Like you can kind of take those notes, and those are things that like I kind of go through with people, like to kind of dive through, like, and most of the times it's not just one, like things work in conjunction with one another, and most of these times these things don't operate independently.
Yeah, for sure. No, there's a lot there. And I was kind of on the same path a while ago where I started learning about, all of the environmental things. And I was just like, this is like years ago at one point. I remember I was living in Florida and I was like, oh my gosh, like change my shampoo, change my conditioner, like change my water source, like all these things. And it's super overwhelming if you like kind of go down that rabbit hole and you don't have anybody to support you with that. And you're kind of just like, oh my gosh, like I'm just going to go sit in my closet for the rest of my life and not, like obviously we can't do that. Like you have to live in the real world, but there are still things that you can do to help, like you said, what are the things that are serving you? What's not? Don't get overwhelmed, because that's just going to be another stress, right? If you are overwhelmed by all this and you're like, oh my God, I have to change every little thing that you're doing. Like, no, like take a step back, and what are kind of the biggest things that you can start to pay attention to versus the things that might not be as, affecting you as much. So
totally. I always tell people that, like, when something runs out, you have to buy something else anyways. Buy a cleaner alternative. I'm constantly sharing of like cleaner brands that I love and just non-tox swaps. I'm a big fan of like DIYs, and like there's a lot of really cost-effective ways. I think a lot of people think that it has to be so expensive, and I mean, yeah, to a point, some of it does cost more money, but at what cost, right? At the cost of my health. I mean, I'm not putting a price on that. So, and obviously everybody's different. I told you, like, I did not do all this stuff overnight. I did not do all this stuff overnight. And so it's a journey, but when you run out of something, switch it with something better, and your hormones will greatly thank you.
Absolutely. Love it. I do have one more question, because we talked a lot about nutrition, hormones, all of that. One more question related to training, because I know that you're super into that, which I love. I'm the same way. I went through a period of my life where I was just like on that kind of overtraining, more is better. I work with a lot of female clients who are still kind of stuck in that mindset. So can you talk to that a little bit, and how that stress in itself is just, especially with females who are trying to change their body composition and trying to maybe lose some body fat and, gain some muscle, whatever it may be, doing too much can actually be something that is hindering you from actually getting like the result that you want. Is there anything you can talk to in terms of what you've seen with your clients, or like what you've been through?
Totally. I love that. Like more is not always better. Sometimes less is more. And, we are also bio-individual, and depending on what type of training, your volume, your frequency, that can change. I'm not saying, and so when I tell people they need to back off their activity because they're training 6-7 days a week and it's like super intense, and like their resting heart rate is significantly higher because their body's stressed, they're not losing fat. There's a reason. So when our bodies are stressed, when cortisol is like stealing the show, our body doesn't give a crap about burning fat, because it's like, okay, we don't know what the heck's going on. Our body's really smart. It likes to store things. I see this a lot with people with like chemical exposure, mold exposure, like overtraining and just inflammation. Like when the body's stressed, it's going to hold. Like you're not going to, like, if you extreme diet and like just overtrain, like you might lose some weight initially, but like it's going to totally backfire significantly in the weeks to come. So when we're stressed, like I said, we hold on to things. And so if fat loss is your goal, like you have to be asking yourself, like, how am I managing my stress? Like, how is my cortisol? How am I managing my day-to-day activities so that I can balance being able to recover, being able to, support my sympathetic nervous system while also being able to like push it when I want to. And so I wear the Whoop. I love it because it really kind of tells me when my nervous system is like primed to go, and I know I can like maybe push it into that kind of a little bit more. I can, really like step it up a little bit more. And like days where it's like, you know what, I'm just going to go for a walk with my dog today, and like, that's okay. Like, you don't have to be a couch potato when I tell you to taper down your trainer, or when you tell people to taper down. It's not like you just sit on your couch all day. I think we are built to walk. We are built to move. We are built to be active in that sense. And so like, please, by all means, like strive for 8 to 10,000 steps a day, every day. That's fine. You don't need to run it. You don't need to sprint it. It can just be a walk. But that in terms of training, I see as kind of different things. So yeah, I mean, in terms of hormones, like I said, finding what that right balance is for you, like working with someone like Rachel or myself, knowing what that is. And sometimes people have no idea because they're just kind of like, I've been ingrained that I need to do 7 days or, whatever, no days off, because like, I'm afraid of gaining weight. And that's like a big thing that I see with people. And I think that's so much like a mindset thing that we need to work on, and know that like your body's not going to put on weight if you don't go in the gym for 60 minutes,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think that's one thing too, that a lot of people are caught up on, like, oh, my hormones are messed up, or, I have hormonal imbalances, and they're looking for the answer to like if they, get blood tests or, the Dutch test, they're looking for the answer to show them physically, like the data that their hormones are messed up. Versus like, okay, even if they are, like, even if you have that data, like, what are you going to do about it? Yes, you can, have things that support that, and supplements and potential, exogenous hormones, if that's something that, you need, depending on what stage of your life you're in and all of that. But a lot of that is going to come back to that root cause. Like, if your hormones are imbalanced, it's because what you're doing is causing that, right? It's not that they're just miraculously imbalanced because
they hate you, your body hates you.
Yeah. It's all going to be dependent on what you're like. They're doing that. They're actually doing the right thing, right?
They're protecting
They're adjusting to protect you from what you're doing, from overtraining, from under eating, from all of that. So it's not that your hormones are the issue necessarily. It's that what you're doing is the issue. So we need to focus on that. And so that's something that, when that, for me personally, just throughout my own journey and through, as I kind of flip that switch in my clients' heads when I work with them, that, hey, it's not necessarily that, yes, having these tests and doing all that is important to kind of, if you've been struggling with something for a while, see where you're at. But like, what's really going to change that is like what you're doing every day, like in your lifestyle. So I think that's something that's important to understand, especially if someone listening to this is like, okay, I need to go out and get a Dutch test. I need to go get blood work. I need to, take all these supplements. It's like, no, like, let's look at all the other stuff that's free and is going to make a big difference versus trying to like put a Band-Aid on it. So I talk about this a lot on the podcast as well. So if my listeners are hearing me repeat this, it's because I'm passionate about it, because it's something that I struggled with for a while. And then flipping that switch in my head, like, hey, like, I don't need to necessarily, go out and buy 1 million supplements right now. Like, let's find what the root cause is, like we started this podcast with. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Well, I feel like we could talk forever, and I think we might have to do a part 2, because I know we wanted to talk more about gut health. I think that topic there's so much to talk about within that topic, and I'd love to, kind of hear what you've learned. I know it's something that you've dove into, if that's the right English, dove into.
I think
there
so.
We go. Dove into. Just because I know that you've, been, within that realm for a while. Gut health is one of those things that I just feel like every time I try to go down the rabbit hole, I just keep going down like one rabbit hole, and I'm like overwhelmed. So I'd love to maybe do a part 2 and talk about, gut health in general and some practical things that people can focus on, or symptoms, things that they can, if they're struggling with bloating or anything like that, ways that they can support that. So if you're down for it, we should do part 2.
Do it.
Sure.
Awesome. Let's do it. I'm always down.
Cool. Awesome. All right. So if you're listening, look forward to that in the future. But let's end with one question. I always end with this question, and then I'll also let you share, where everybody can find you and all that. But is there anything that you've changed your mind about in the past year, and why?
I've been preparing for this, and I still have like so many things I could change. So in the past year, okay. So I guess I would say maybe a year ago, I personally was like, I see a lot of people with insulin resistance, and like, this is kind of something we talked about on my podcast. And I was like, it's really good to go lower carb, like, and it is for insulin resistance, but I've also found that like, it's also really important that when you get people more flexible to like be able to add in more carbs. And so, I kind of like using cyclical keto for those things instead of just like constantly being like, okay, you're doing this and you're doing this for like months. Like, how can we kind of like make this more of a lifestyle thing? I'd say, I mean, oh my God, there were like, there's so many things that I feel like I've changed my diet, but that's definitely a big one. And in terms of like, just more nuanced, making things more like of a lifestyle. Like there's a time and a place for protocols. And I do love using keto therapeutically for people, but I've also found to like not necessarily fear carbs as much, even though I'm in like the space of insulin resistance, especially in relation to hormones, but like kind of coming at it from this nuanced approach. I found that to be like just a little bit more, I don't know, sustainable.
Balance. Yeah.
Balanced.
Yeah. Sounds like you're talking about metabolic flexibility.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was making that joke because obviously this podcast is called MetFlex and Chill. So we're all about metabolic flexibility here, but there's so many different, topics within that. And we talked a lot about that on your podcast.
I know, maybe that's why it's fresh in my mind. Cause I'm like,
yeah,
that's probably why, but it's a good thing. Cause it's something that I definitely feel like I've changed my perspective on a little bit.
For sure.
That's a hard question.
Awesome. Yeah, I know it is. It is. Well, I'll ask you again on our next part 2.
I'll start
you'll
thinking.
Have time to think about it. Cool. All right. Do you want to just share with our viewers or listeners, where they can find you on social media, your website, any programs or anything like that you want to share?
Sure. So I am probably most active on Instagram at Dr. Halie Schoff. My practice Instagram is at alpha.chiro.health.wellness. I just share a lot of like my practice and what I do there. My website, Eat Super Easy, drhalieschoff.com. You can find like all of my favorite brands, how to work with me, my online courses. I have a bloating and digestive health masterclass. And then I also have an online hormone course that I've got an online membership. I've got a lot going on just to kind of like really give people the resources, right? Like I really want people to like, whether they work with me, whether they're in my membership, they go through a course, like I want them to get something valuable. And I feel like that's such a cool space that we're in now where practitioners, doctors, health coaches, like fitness trainers, like they have all of these different resources to people's disposal so that people can really like do what fits them and their needs, which I think is so cool.
Yeah.
Oh, and my podcast. Totally forgot about
your
that.
Podcast. What's the podcast?
Alpha Health.
So everybody.
Alpha Health and Wellness Radio.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm definitely on the same page. I feel like we have a lot of similarities. I feel like, again, I could talk to you for hours. So I'm excited for part 2 already.
I know. I am too. I'm so excited.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So I will link everything in the show notes, everything you mentioned, your social media, podcast, obviously. I've listened to a bunch of your episodes, all awesome.
Thank you.
Definitely highly recommend that. And yeah, so I guess everybody stay tuned for part 2.
Awesome.
Cool. All right. Talk to you soon. Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of MetFlex and Chill. I hope you enjoyed it. It would be awesome if you could give the show 5 stars and leave a review on iTunes. We're trying to get placed in the top 100 health podcasts, and the 5-star ratings and reviews are what can help make that happen. I'll add step-by-step directions for leaving a review in the show notes. I know it's a big ask, but it really helps. Thanks again. See you next time.